G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David, and I have the pleasure of bringing in a guest every week to share what I call someone who's best in breed, so someone who lives, eats, breathes, sleeps, all things buying and investing in property. Today is a particularly special episode because I'm joined in the studio not by one guest, but two guests. And one happens to be my spouse, better half, and business partner in Bernadette. Christy David, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Excellent. And we're also joined, and that's why I say I'm so pumped, because today we're joined by a client, which is a very unique conversation we're going to be having today. Welcome to the studio, Michael O'Neill.
All right, thanks very much for having me, Aaron.
Pleasure, mate. I'm really happy that you said yes, because it's a big step for clients to come on to share their journey. It can be somewhat vulnerable. We're not asking you to bare your soul when it comes to all things financial. Yeah, so I feel what we wanted to have a chat about, apart from the fact of our love of Test cricket, which I think we'll come to in a second, but really is the journey that a lot of people have gone, that will go on. You've been there, so you've kind of maybe do what we call scar tissue, some lessons learnt, some blissful unawareness as you've gone through your journey, maybe things that have caught you out that you go, hey, I wish I knew that earlier, for example, as well. And that's probably one of the big parts we love when investors share that as well. But before we kick off, a little bit about the man, Michael himself, what I call the 3 Ps, a little about yourself personally.
Yep.
A bit about yourself professionally, and a bit your own property journey. And when I talk property journey, I know that you bought a few investment properties and you live in a lovely area in Sydney. So why don't we start with the first one, which is a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I went to uni straight after school and did a Bachelor of Economics.
Yeah.
And then I worked in the private sector. And then I went back to uni and did a Master of Teaching.
Yeah.
And then I've been working in the education sector since and teaching economics mostly.
Excellent.
So the idea of, talking about financial markets or property markets or economics is quite comfortable for me.
Yes.
So it's all good. And also I sort of talk to friends who want to make that first step, both in terms of, say, investing outside their super or, what should I do with my super? Financially educating people where I can. And, also talking to students about the economic landscape, if you like. That's something I do all the time. I feel quite comfortable with.
Excellent. I've probably been a thorn in your side. Bernie and I were actually joking this morning about economics. So something came up when we were on our way into the city. I failed microeconomics 3 times.
Oh, sure, right.
Yeah, you're probably going to laugh at me. Couldn't get my head around it.
It is a bit cringeworthy.
Couldn't get my head around it. But I guess for you, economics is something that comes very easily to you. And I feel like because there's 2 parts you look at this, right? As an investor, is being an economist, is it too close to home for you sometimes that you can get caught up in some of the data? Or is it that you feel that it gives you a level of education to make good decisions, for example?
Well, if it makes you feel any better, just getting back to
don't worry about it. I had a great time at uni, so that made me feel better.
But John Maynard Keynes failed his high school economics, and when asked why, he said, well, I probably knew more than they did. So he was probably right. But second part of the question, sorry, can you just refresh?
So does that make, I guess, is it too close to home sometimes as an investor? Because you're looking at you got all these data points, for example, and you're looking at the forecasts, and sometimes, and I'd say it's not as something rude or insulting, some people with dumb luck tend to do okay because they're blissfully unaware, whereas it's too close to home and it's like, but what about this and what about this? And we're looking at inflation, we're looking at the global economy, we're looking at,
No,
macro
for
policy.
me, the funny thing is, like, being good at economics and knowing the, economic theory and knowing how the economy works and all that is great, but it doesn't make you a good investor. And you can be a good investor without really having a great understanding of economics.
Yeah.
So, and what I found is, working in the education sector, other teachers would look at me and think, don't you have all these fantastic investments? Aren't you an expert in financial markets? And aren't you making a lot of money or something? And I was hopeless at investing, And so I really hadn't made any progress until, when I was 40. Yeah. I didn't buy my first property until I was 40. So, and even then that was a studio, so 27 square meters. So it was an entry point into the property market. Yeah. And I had no savings up until then. So I was very reckless really between 20 and 40. Well, not reckless, but not...
Enjoying life.
Yes, I was full of experience and life experience, and
if you had a balance sheet for life, that would be well skewed in your favour. For example, life experience and probably a lot of travel, enjoyment.
Yeah, and I was working overseas and I was travelling, and I did a couple of degrees at uni, and
statistically, that's when most investors will actually get into the market.
Yeah, right.
Is around that 40-year mark.
Yeah. So getting my first property was a really big deal, because you think about all this debt, you think, oh my goodness, it's fantastic to get a foothold in the property market. It's great to be a property owner, and all of a sudden you've got all this debt and interest rates and repayments, and you're thinking about, responsibility and being tied to it all. But, once you start, after a year or two, you forget about the debt and life goes on.
Isn't it funny you say that? Because I say that to a lot of newer clients, for example, and they're worried about repayments, for example, what happens with the market. I'm like, I'll call you in about 3 or 6 months, two things. We don't remember what the interest rate is, whereas that's what was stressing out when you first went for the loan, and you won't even remember what you paid for the property, because once you're in it, this psyche is you're waiting for the market to drop, and as soon as you're in this property, it's like, has it gone up now? And it's like this switch just starts to happen for a lot of people. It's like, the grass is greener once you're a property owner as opposed to being on the outside.
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't it?
It's very much us and them mentality, in terms of being in the market and not.
Correct.
And I think with investors, it's the same. Investors are really worried about very small things before they start their investment, first investment property. And the thing that really irks people is what happens if I can't get a tenant? What happens if there's a disruption to the rental income and I can't make the repayments on the loan? Yeah. I don't want to be putting my hand in my own pocket because my budget's already tight for myself. Yeah. So that's their main worry. The other thing is the first thing they think of as an investor, I should go out and buy a unit, an apartment, and I probably should get one close to home because I know the area, and I like to drive past it on the way home, and look at my building wealth, and that's all fine and great, and it amazes me how pervasive that thinking is, but that's not necessarily a good investment strategy.
Yeah, there's. I think I've mentioned this in the past. There's a home bias, and there's been a big article done by a couple of uni researchers. 66% of all investors will buy in and around their corridor where they live. Level of comfort, for example, it's something tangible. I guess it's very different to buying a share versus buying a property. It's something tangible versus non-tangible in the way of the stock market. That level of maybe control over it as well. Yeah,
there's an attachment thing there, and even the local area thing. I know this local area. It's a good suburb. But it may already be the suburb that's had the most uplift, and there are other suburbs that have yet to experience that, which would be much better investments. Yeah.
So you mentioned about, and you openly spoke about that your first one was 27 square metre, which most people would say, look, anything under 50 square metres restricts. And you've probably learnt that because, and to be very, very open, just want to share this, is anything that we do talk about isn't intended to give advice. So if you are seeking advice, please speak to a professional. Full disclosure is that, yes, we do work with Michael as one of our clients. You're not paid to be on the show, nor anyone that you mentioned, for example, is not paid or affiliated either. So if we do mention other professionals, just very, very clear, we get that other way as well. And I guess the other part for us is your level of transparency. So I want to say thank you very much for being open. But that first property, like you're saying, got you into the market, and quite often something is better than nothing. So you might look back going, it's what I could afford, or it's the property that I liked, or a location that I really wanted, for example, and just helped me get my foot in the door. And after that, then it was a series of decision makings that help you bought your next one, and subsequently build your portfolio after that. So looking back in hindsight, was there anything that you thought, I wish I knew? Was there any learnings that you had along the way as well?
Yeah, for sure. So, that first place that I bought, it was a studio. It was in a good area, sort of inner eastern suburbs. yes, it was 27 square metres, but it was a brand new apartment.
Yeah.
It was pretty well fitted out. You know, it had a washing machine, it had a dishwasher.
Yeah.
You know, it had the electric towel thing. It had
all the mod cons.
Yeah, all the mod cons. And then I put in furniture with a pull-down bed. So the furniture was basically custom made to the unit,
nice.
Wow.
entertainment unit. So even though it was only 27 square metres, I just felt like I had everything, and there was something I could live in. It was on the 5th floor. I had a view of the city, and yes, it was very space. You had to be very space conscious, but it was very functional, and it suited me. And for the first time, I was settled in a full-time job, and I was settled in my home residence. And then all of a sudden I was earning income, and I just focused on the debt and getting the debt down. Yeah.
Sounds like the ultimate minimalist before there was minimalism.
Yeah.
Leading the movement.
Yeah. So one of my family mentors said, look, just imagine you're living on a ship. And the other benefit was that whenever I travelled and went to hotel rooms, I'd always walk in and go, geez, this is a big one. But yeah, you become, it was very efficient. Yeah. It was very, I was space conscious and
And as you've gone on your journey, I think one of the big parts that I see a lot of people get caught out is that this takes a lot of work. And finding a team can be time, energy consuming, whereas I think, investing in property is passive, and that's kind of what we're thought to conditioned to believe, whereas I find it very active. You've got to find the right team. You almost got to go through a few people to get to the right professionals that you want to do and work with as well. So how have you gone about building your team?
Yeah. Okay. So actually, I didn't fully answer your previous question. Yeah. So in terms of, say, getting the money, I really didn't know how to go about it. I spoke to my sister. She'd been a homeowner and had done it before. So she took me to her bank manager, and I sat down with him and said, look, I've got this deposit. How much can I borrow? What can I afford? And that's, that's one way of doing it. There's nothing wrong going to a bank or a bank manager. Not, yeah. But, they had, it's the thing that my sister, impressed on me was having, you must have this 20% deposit and you must avoid lender's mortgage insurance. So I bought the studio. If I had borrowed 90% instead of 80%, I could have bought a 1-bedroom flat. I would have had more space, and that would have gone up more. Yeah. So, this very old school thinking you must have a 20% deposit to get into the market is very much a barrier for a lot of people. Whereas I would say the other way of going around it is go and see a mortgage broker, someone who's good. They're the guys that can get you the money. When you know how much money you can borrow, then you know your borrowing capacity, and that's how much you can spend on the properties. So that was, just getting my first primary place of residence. And then I just worked really hard paying down the debt. So all of a sudden I had this equity in there, and I didn't, think much about it. All I thought about was paying off debt. Yeah. And maybe upgrading at some point, you might move to a 1-bed or 2-bed or whatever. But then I came across a group called Custodian, and again, this is no advertisement for them, but I did find them very, very good. They're fairly big operators led by John Fitzgerald. He's very experienced. And these guys help, families, individuals, middle of the road sort of people get into the investment property market. And the motivation is, every week 7,000 people retire from the workforce, and most of them don't have enough in their super. So
that's an interesting start.
Yeah.
So, I I probably need to quote Bernard Salt or something there, but we've got an aging population, and lots of people are retiring, and lots of people simply don't have enough in their super, and that's a bad thing, particularly when you're living longer. So one way of getting around that is don't rely on the pension or the government. Take responsibility for your own wealth creation, and the best way to do that is through the property market and investing in property. So that's the sort of thing. And then they drilled into me a lot of these things about what sort of, they educated me in terms of property investment. And they looked after getting the land and the house for the first property.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's where I started.
And the reason why I mentioned about building your team partly is, I mean, you and I have had wonderful interactions. Now I know you're doing Damien Walker in our team and also Bernie on a new acquisition. So let's just go there for a second. So Bernie is working on your self-managed super fund at the moment, and that's one of your sweet spots, Bernie. Take us through, I guess, and something that you mentioned the other day when we were chatting was, this actually takes quite a fair bit of effort. And when I hear Bernie talking on the phone, it's pretty much every client that's going, this is more work than we actually thought it would be. So does that mean that's probably something that you hear pretty consistently?
Absolutely. And it's something that catches people by surprise, especially if you've been through the loan process before. You think it is going to follow the same flow. And it does to the most part, but the complication is that you do have more entities involved. So you've got 2 trusts, an SMSF, a bare trust, and then attached to those you've got 2 corporate trustees. And I think that's what really adds the complexity to the process. And we're working on a refinance at the moment. How have you found that process?
Again, it's much harder refinancing a property within your super fund, self-managed super, rather than outside. And that goes back to the whole process of setting up a self-managed super fund.
Yes.
So I had my place, the unit. I got the first investment property. I followed the process there and I learned a lot. That was a house and land package. So we bought the land, we built the house, took 8 months to build, and then we rented it out. And the same group, but they focused on super, and they said, we can help you if you want to buy a property with your super fund. So the idea of getting a second property at that point, which is around the same time I got the first one, was really appealing. To do that, I had to set up a self-managed super fund. Normally they say you shouldn't do that unless you've got a minimum of $200,000, which is just around what I had. So I was just scraping in. So we set up a self-managed super fund. And as you say, then if you want to buy a property, you have to set up the bare trust. And then the bare trust buys a property. It has to be a finished property. And there's all sorts of special rules that apply to that don't apply to investment properties outside your super. But just setting up the self-managed super fund, setting up the bare trust, going through the purchase, even that, the amount of paperwork and the amount of time consuming and hands-on, you have to be prepared to do that if that's what you want.
Absolutely. But I think there's 2 really huge benefits for it. And one of them is that if you have a property in SMSF and you have a loan attached to that, it's treated as totally separate to your individual borrowing power. So if you've maxed out your borrowing power from an individual point of view, well, you can set up an SMSF and still get borrowing or a loan in there. So if you're maxing out in one part, there's still opportunities for you to go again. And then the longer term view of the property in the SMSF is when you do eventually go to sell that property, if that does happen, you don't pay capital gains tax. That's huge. If you've bought a good property, you've been guided well, great location, you've got capital growth, that's a game changer.
Yeah, definitely. And, the property I bought, because I only had 200,000 and you can only borrow 70%, which is normally the rule. And even, back in the year that I did it was around 2014. Banks were much more willing to lend then than they are now. And, I guess the whole sort of APRA environment was much more friendly towards properties in your self-managed super fund. But, so the 200,000 and then borrowing 70% got me to about 350, and I bought a townhouse in Melbourne for 350.
Fantastic.
So, it was not, I'd be looking for a minimum 400 square metres and preferably over 500 square metres. Get a 422 house, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-garage. But with this one, it was 3-bedroom, 2-car, and it was on 165 square metres, so it was relatively small. But, I just thought, well, it's a property and that's what I wanted in my super fund, and I think that's great. So...
and you could keep waiting and waiting, but it's like, hey, which one are you better doing? You better get in the market.
Yeah.
Not that you say you wanted this, but make some type of compromise, for example, but you're not compromising the quality. It's going, look, I just need to compromise on the specifications, for example, as well.
And also less debt. So, and buying something that's more affordable for you. But that was 2014. We're refinancing now. I think that's worth, I bought it for $350. I think it's worth $550 now. And the rent's $350 a week, which more, even though the repayments have gone up, which is one of the reasons I'm refinancing. But the rent still exceeds the interest repayments. So it's been great, And, we talked about buying these apartments, near home. This is a place that I have actually never been to. I've never seen it physically. I've never met the property managers. Having said that, it gets inspections every 6 months. I see probably 25 to 30 photographs of inside the place and around the place. I talk to the property managers regularly, so much so that, a lot of the professional people I deal with investment property, you build friendships. It's not just a professional relationship. And you feel like you get to know them really well. And it's I think this is the first time we've met in person, but the conversation flows easily and you feel like you already know the people.
That's right.
But it goes both ways. And so you're saying, hey, it's great to have a team that you can count on. I think it goes both ways for us. Give an example that you've been, certainly not blowing your smoke, but you've been a wonderful client. What you see is what you get with yourself, for example, quite easygoing. Organised is probably something we love about someone like yourself as well. And then when someone does a good job, you thank them in the way, say, like a referral or something like that. And you've been wonderful like that. So,
but also I think really hungry around the wealth creation. And that's what's driving the decisions that you're making. And it's not short-term decisions of like possibly, I don't know, can I save 0.1 on a rate? It's a longer-term view to go, does this property get me to where I need to be for retirement, which we've spoken about.
Yeah, and like you say, the capital-free gain situation with the self-managed super, like I've never sold a property. So even that 27 square metres, I actually still own that, live in the same building.
Wonderful.
And have moved upstairs to level 7, 1 bedroom. So that's an investment property now.
Nice one.
But there's no mortgage on that per se. There are loans against it, but they're equity drawdowns for deposits on other houses. So, I guess working with people like yourself, what I'm looking for is debt efficiency. I want to get a low interest rate and want to minimise my repayments. And you need to be reviewing that, particularly in a dynamic environment like this where rates are going up. How much am I paying? What's the cost of debt? Can I refinance? Can I get my interest rate down? Can I get my repayments down? But again, it's not just repayments. There's other things as well.
We spoke. I think we spoke earlier before about another purchase you got in the pipeline, and that was a land. And I don't want to bring up a moot point, for example, but I know you bought that probably about 2 years ago. You bought that land.
Almost to the day. Over 2 years ago. Yeah.
Spoke about that, and then I guess 2 years, and it's like, the market has shifted, the market's moved, and it gets to that point that we're trying to wait for a registration settlement, for example. You say that, yes, and you're quite easygoing about it, but someone else might be getting really frustrated by the delays, for example, and some of that. How have you taken that in your stride, and then what's the game plan around that property? Because time delays, I feel, especially when you're buying, say, land and going for a build, the goalposts just keep moving, for example, whether that's off the plan or land and build. So how do you handle moving goalposts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it was easier because I've had the experience of purchasing investment property before. I would have hated to have been a first investment property for someone.
Or even a homeowner trying to get into the house.
Because it's been a very sort of difficult time. That I put a deposit on the land in November 2 years ago. So whatever, 2020. Yeah. And to this day, that land is still not registered. Having said that, I paid a 5% deposit on the land, and the price of that land was $220,000. It's over 500 square meters. So I sat down with Damien. We did a quick calculation, and it comes out around $400 something a square metre.
Yeah.
That's cheap.
Yeah.
And then he just jumped on the Google and looked at properties per square metre up there now, and they're closer to 600 to 800.
Fantastic.
So even though it's taken all that time, the price I paid for the land is locked in. So any capital gains since then, and there have been very significant ones, is to my benefit, and yet I'm not paying any interest on the money that I have to eventually borrow to buy it. So
and all for 5% deposit.
All for 5% deposit. That's right. So I guess understanding, the bigger picture and the moving parts. But you got to be a more sophisticated investor to do that.
Yeah.
And to get to that point, you probably need a mentor.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good having that scaffolding when you start, because you really need that.
Excellent. So if someone's come to you, and you mentioned about a mentor, if someone's come to you and go, hey, Michael, give us a couple of points, for example, to help us on our journey.
Yeah.
Take a moment to think about it. What's some of the points that you'd say, hey, look, this is going to set you up for success?
I consider myself very knowledgeable, but I'm not an expert and I'm not trained,
Yeah.
So I always refer people to professionals. Yeah. But having said that, if it was a more informal conversation and we're just having a bit of banter.
Shooting the breeze.
Yeah. And where are you at? What do you want? That sort of thing. I would encourage people to look at buying land instead of buying strata. Yeah. Is a old saying that the land appreciates and the property or the real estate, the building depreciates.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you really want to build wealth, you want to be buying land and you want to think about how much am I paying for this land per square metre and how much is it, going to be worth in the future. Well, I mean, however much it's going to be worth in the future, you don't know, but hopefully it's going up. Yeah. But you're not going to get those same increases if you buy strata, if you buy apartments and units, because the land content is so much lower. Yeah. So, but that's really hard for people as investors because they desperately want an investment apartment. They don't want to go into a house and land package that they don't know about. Right. Because you're buying land, am I getting a good deal for this? You've got to build a house, how am I going to deal with a builder? Can I trust them? All that sort of thing. But that's where, for me, I would refer them to custodian. And I would say have a conversation with them, and then see how you feel. No pressure, no commitment, no cost. But these guys deal with property investment all the time, and they can answer your questions. Yeah. And then what custodian will say to them, well, if you want to go ahead, the first thing you need to do is work out your borrowing capacity. Yeah. Now, custodian does that all in-house. Yeah. So I've kind of moved away from that model, and I've got my own people in place. So for finance, the first person I will come and see is Atelier Wealth, and I would say, hey, I'm interested in, can you tell me my borrowing capacity? Sure. Once you know the borrowing capacity, then you know how much you can spend on a property. Mm-hmm. So I think land content is really important, and there's no point in doing anything until you know your borrowing capacity. Yeah, nice. And having a good mortgage broker that you trust is the best place to start. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I guess what happens is some people put the horse before the cart a little bit. They want to buy the property. Now they need to work backwards a little bit, whereas what you're saying is, hey, look, just keep working downstream and go, well, how much can you buy? What's your deposit? Cash flow, therefore you know what type of asset to buy, and whether that's through an SMSF, whether that's through your individual names, for example, the what and the how, and what you're buying, for example, can take care of itself later, but you need to know those basic questions earlier. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. And the reason I say new house is because of the tax benefits with that. So I mentioned debt efficiency earlier, and you do that with your mortgage broker, and then with the new house, there's a couple of benefits. One is that the maintenance. So when you buy an existing house, you don't know what the maintenance problems are that might be hiding. And even still, it's an older building, there's going to be maintenance issues. With a new property, so tax department, I think, sees the property as 40 years, building as 40 years, and it depreciates over that time 2.5% per year. So, but importantly, when you build a new place, you get to write off all the fittings, etc., in the first 2 or 3 years. So there's big tax benefits there. There's tax benefits with depreciation along the line. There may be negative gearing, even though, particularly early on. And all those tax benefits can feed into a tax variation form, which increases your personal income, and you don't have to wait till the end of the tax year to get your tax return. And to do all that, you need a good accountant. Yeah. And you need accountants that are experienced with property investment. Yeah. So I work with a group there, just for the sake of it, WSC Group Accountants, and they're fantastic. They're really good. And I have one accountant for the self-managed Superfund, and I have one accountant for non-super. But they specialise in property investment. Yeah.
And that's, again, talk about specialisation, for example. It's, some are, again, like any industry, good, bad, great, for example, and you want ones that are great, that know property, that you mentioned about tax variation, for example, and how that is at the right fit for you. How much can you actually get in depreciation, and how much, because here's the challenge they got for some clients, right? Good incomes, they want depreciation, for example, maybe, and then some properties that they get, they're positively geared. It's like we've fixed one tax problem, but you may be creating another for yourself as well. And that's, again, just trying to understand that strategy and going that little bit deeper. Yeah. Here's what this actually means for you as well.
Yeah, people struggle to focus on what's important. Like some people focus on negative gearing, or some people say, should I get high income or should I get high growth? When you can have both. And it's not really all about negative gearing unless you're a very high income earner. Yeah, patience is a key thing. So, like I said, I've never sold a property. I'm a buy and hold person. Not to say I never won't, but that will be a transition to retirement, conversation that I'll have with the financial planner. And the reason for that is that it's a long-term commitment. It's minimum 5 years, but really 20 years and even a lifetime. As Warren Buffett sometimes says with shares, it's like a marriage. You find what you want, something of quality, you commit to it, and then you're building wealth throughout your working life.
Oh, correct. I mean, look at anyone that bought properties like 30, 40 years ago. I mean, people made some insane money in a few years, but that's an abnormal type of growth. But you go holding that property over a good 20, 30 years, for example, that's true wealth creation that can feed intergenerational wealth. Yes. Through property, right? It's one of the big things we speak about.
Well. Yeah. So, the custodian model is that you never sell, and as you benefit from capital gains and as the price of houses goes up, yes, you get more wealthy. You could sell it, take the capital gains, but you'd be paying tax on it. But there's no point in that. There's a lesser point in that, and the real point is to duplicate. And so use the equity. So your debt's not going to change because you're only paying interest only. You're going to get the headroom as the price goes up with the property. That headroom is your equity. Borrow against equity, buy another property. And then you keep doing that. And, some people get all, enormous. Once you get over three properties, you're less than 1% of the population in Australia. So
that's a very interesting stat. Once you get over 3 properties, as in investment properties, you're in the top 1% of investors, of property holders in this country, and it's a real it's a game changer. Yeah. Something I'm taking away, Michael, is you are engaging with all of these professionals. You are playing a very active part in your property investment journey. Sometimes people talk about property and they say, it's great, it's set and forget. But when I speak with you, it's never that way. We're always talking about what's happening in the market, what's going on, who's the team that you're working with. Is that something you find as well? It's a real part of your life. And
Yeah. So when I got so I was working in the private sector for a while, then I got back into teaching. I was doing economics. And when I started teaching economics, I thought, well, I've got an economics degree and I know everything. And after about a year, I thought, there's a lot of things you don't know. You should go back and read the textbook. Yeah. And then I sort of just started to self-teach myself with the economics. And so every time I came across something I didn't know, I go and research it, and it's easy with the web and so forth. So I got to a point where I was really happy with this and I still, pursue everything in economics and want to be a lifelong learner. But then the focus started to switch to investment, and initially property investment, and then equity investment as well. So, and getting back to that, the team concept. So you have your mortgage brokers, you have the people that can sort of mentor you in terms of buying a property, buying the land, and doing the construction. Which you don't want to be too hands-on with. You want a lot of support, particularly dealing with builders there.
Yeah.
You want a good set of accountants to help you. As soon as you start owning these assets, you should probably write a will and go to an estate lawyer and get that done. And you should also see a financial planner and have that in place. So you've got some long-term strategic goals, and once you've got assets outside your super and inside your super, different rules for super, it starts to get complicated. Again, you need an expert. So that's the sort of team you want to be putting together. Yeah, and to find people that that are good for you and you want to work with, the two ingredients. Well, the main ingredient is trust. I mean, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with your finances, and you're dealing with your life savings.
Okay.
And you've got to be happy. You've got to trust the people you're dealing with. 100%. Because if you don't, it undermines your confidence and everything. It undermines everything.
And that's what we say about buying a bad investment or getting really bad advice. It sets people so far back. What's the saying? Like you can invest money, lose it, but you can make back again. You can invest time, lose it, but you won't get that time back again. And that's where probably a good amount of energy for a lot of people goes is they've lost the time and they lost the money, and that kills their confidence as an investor as well. Leaves them maybe that bit of doubt or chip on their shoulder as well. But but just further with that, and it does build resentment. And people tend to go one of two ways there. Either they say, this is terrible, it's capitulation, I'm never going to invest in anything again because I'm just going to lose money and that I'm not prepared to go through that again. Yeah.
Or they say, that was a really harsh lesson, but I learned from that and I'll never, ever make that mistake again. And I've never met anyone who's a successful investor who hasn't had a bad experience on a done investment. But the key is to learn from that and to make sure that it never happens again.
Yeah, well said. Mike, I want to say thank you very much. Really appreciate you're a friend of ours, for example. Now you're a friend of the show. And really, really want to thank you for being open about your experiences, for example. Not a lot of clients and there's no judgment, but not all the clients will feel comfortable to share their story, for example, but it takes courage. So, mate, thank you so much.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael.
Excellent.
Pleasure.
And thanks, Bernie, for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Make you a regular. Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Raises the tone.
Yeah, correct, right. I got a voice, I got a head for radio and Bernie's got a head for video, perhaps. So, I want to say thank you very much for joining us for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. If you've loved it, leave us a review, or even better, send us some feedback about maybe a topic that you want answered as well, and we'd love to help you on your journey as well. That's a wrap. We'll see you next time. Thanks very much.